Welcome to Madlik. My name is Jeffrey Stern, and at Madlik we like to light a spark or shed a little light on a Jewish text or tradition. Today, as we approach Passover under the cloud of coronavirus, we want to explore the institution of Pesach Sheni and listen to what it teaches us about celebrating redemption while there are dark forces outside. So take off your mask, remove your gloves, and take a look at the Sephardian source notes. Join me for the Passover Makeover. So if I was to ask you whether in Judaism there's a concept of making it up, like a makeup test. You know, if you miss Sukkot, a week later, can you go ahead and sit in a sukkah? If you miss counting the Omer, you missed it, you snooze, you lose. Hanukkah, you can only do Hanukkah in Kislev when the holiday happened. Shabbat, it's unimaginable that you could forget 1 week that Saturday is Shabbat, and the rabbi would say, don't worry about it. You can, on Monday, just don't turn on the lights and listen to the Torah and everything's going to be okay. So that's the case in general. But if I would ask you if there's one holiday when the exact moment of celebration, of commemoration makes a difference, I think we'd all agree it's Passover. In other words, Sukkot is primarily a harvest festival. Yes, we like to pretend that it has to do with the booths that the Jews were in the desert. And even Shavuot, where we celebrate the giving of the Torah, it's actually never even mentioned in the Torah the exact date that the Torah was given. But as we're going to see from the first text that we're going to learn, for Passover, the most important thing is it's at that moment. If you go to the third text that I give, it's Mark number 3, in the Haggadah, we say in each generation a person is obligated to see himself as if he left Egypt. And it says in the Torah, and you shall explain to your son on that day. Bayom hahu. The point is, we're reliving, when we do the Seder, we are reliving a moment in Jewish history, and we're actually invited to reenact that moment. So of any holiday, of any mitzvah, that you would say there's no possibility that if you miss it, you can make it up at another time, I think we can almost all agree it would be precisely Passover. Which takes us to our first text. In Numbers 9, it says as following: let the Israelite people offer the Passover sacrifice at its time, b'mo'ado. You shall offer it on the 14th day of this month at twilight, and its set time, and you shall offer it in accordance with the rules and the rites. And Moses instructed the Israelites to offer the Passover sacrifice, and they offered the Passover sacrifice in the first month on the 14th day of the month. They're almost repeating over and over again the exact date. Set your calendar. At twilight, in the wilderness of Sinai. Remember what happened at twilight. The Jews were passed over. They were sitting in their homes eating the Passover sacrifice. Just as the Lord had commanded Moses, so the Israelites did. Then it goes on to verse 6. And this is the first time they were going to celebrate Passover in the desert. But there were some men who were unclean by reason of a corpse and could not offer the Passover sacrifice on that day. Appearing that same day before Moses and Aaron, they said to them. So we have a little drama here. This is taking place mamash, Erev Shabbat, Erev Pesach. These men come over to Moses. They've been in touch with a corpse, and by Jewish law, they are impure. And they said, unclean though we are by reason of a corpse, why must we be deprived from presenting the Lord's offering at its set time with the rest of the Israelites? And Moses said to them, stand by and let me hear instructions the Lord gives about you. So it's almost as though you called in, you finally got through to the service desk, and they said, hold on, I need to talk to my supervisor. So Moses says, I'm going to go ask God. And he comes back and he says, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelite people, saying, when any of you or for posterity are defiled by a corpse or on a long journey would offer a sacrifice to the Lord, they shall offer it in the 2nd month on the 14th day of the month at twilight. You can do it a month later. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, and they shall not leave any of it over until morning. They shall not break a bone of it. They shall offer it in strict accord with the law of the Passover sacrifice. Okay, let's stop there. So in a radical moment, and we have to pause it a little bit, and we're going to come back to this later on, but they come to Moses and they raise a problem that is not covered in God's Torah. It only happens very rarely. It happened with the daughters of Tzlofchad. It happened when Jethro came and said to Moses, you can't go on this way. These are critical laws. But meanwhile, they came to him, and it was such a good question that Moses turns to God, and God immediately gives them an out. He gives them a solution. So of all the days that you would think that you can't change the date, we have a situation, a unique situation, where God says you can change the date. And you can do this over in a month's time. So I have always been fascinated by this law, but to be honest, the time that I became the most fascinated was when I talked to a friend of mine named Frederick Brenner. And Frederick Brenner is a photographer who has gone all over the world, and he has taken pictures of vanishing Jewish communities. Now, in most cases, the communities were vanishing gradually through assimilation, through people moving away. But in the instance in Portugal that I'm going to introduce you to now, they vanished overnight. And he was a part, and he was a witness to the vanishing. And it was his first book that he ever published. It's published in French. And here's a copy of the book, and it's called Muranos. And it's about the last crypto-Jews, the last Muranos that he discovered in a place called Piemonte, Portugal. And what he told me isn't well known. It's a footnote in the book. There's a movie about it that I have a link to, and it's on YouTube now with English subtitles. But the truth is they kept a very distinct way of Judaism. And one of the things that they did, and there's a picture of it here, is lighting the Shabbos candles. Notice she's on her knees lighting the Shabbos candles. She's also lighting them in a cupboard. And what she would do after lighting them would be to close the cupboard. These were Jews who were practicing their Judaism in secret. This is 520 years after the Inquisition. And in the movie, you can tell that in the town they live in, everybody with a wink and a stare knows that they're different, that they're Jewish. But typically when they get married, they have a private ceremony at home, and then they go to the church and they ask the priest to marry them. They go to Christmas services, but in secret, even though nowadays there's no punishment for being a Jew, but in respect, kind of innate respect for their forebears, they continue in this tradition. So the Shabbat is a great example of this. But Passover is what really intrigued me, because they keep Passover a month after the Jewish people keep Passover. So one of the things that their forebears under persecution did was they said, we cannot celebrate Passover the same time as Easter. It's going to be difficult enough to go to the attic and bake our bread, but we can do it a month later. And when my friend Frederick came to Portugal, one of the things that he did was he talked to the priest. And the priest called him over and he said, you have to do me a favor. These people are not Christians. They're not Catholics. We know they're not Catholics. They come to me and I have to marry them. They come to me and I have to baptize them. I'm just going through the route. Could you kindly get them a rabbi? And in the movie that you can see on YouTube, and it's called the Last Marranos. Literally, you have a young Jew who comes from Lisbon, full of piss and vinegar and a lot of halachic knowledge, and he starts telling them that everything they've done is wrong. And at a certain point in time, they're talking. And by the way, the people that transmitted their traditions from generation to generation were the women, not the men. If you had a halachic question, you would go to the oldest woman in the congregation, and she would tell you what she remembered. And all of a sudden, this rabbi with piss and vinegar says, well, now the men are going to tell us what to do. And by the way, Passover is celebrated on the 14th of Nisan. And they interview, towards the end, an older woman, and they say, are you going to observe this new religion? And she says, no, I need to observe the religion of my forebears. And they said, and what about your children? Are you concerned that they will religion in this way? She says it's fine for them. Obviously, this is what needs to be done. And in another book that Frederick published, and this was after 20 years of doing these studies, he has scholarly essays on each of the books and the communities that he visited. And he has, I couldn't believe it when I saw it, he has a paragraph from a great French existential philosopher named Jacques Derrida. And it's in the quotes. And of course, he writes only the way a French existentialist could write. He says, they make of their secret an archived invisible visibility. What do they finally know of their secret, of the secret that keeps them before they keep it? The Last Marranos bears witness to the fact that those named in the title are undergoing the loss of their secret. There's a dialectic here that by celebrating the second Passover, they were in fact celebrating the first Passover. They were celebrating a Passover under duress, a Passover of fear, sitting in a home, a Leil Shmurim, a night of watching, where you took your religion and it defined you and you defined it. And for all those 520 years, when they kept this second Passover, they were giving honor to all that their parents had given to get them there. And they were, in a sense, celebrating a more authentic Passover than the first. So it's that dialectic that always intrigued me. And I really encourage you and invite you. The subtitles on the YouTube movie are absolutely terrible. But I put two links, one link to the whole movie and one link to the moment where this rabbi with a smirk on his face tells them, and now you have to keep Passover in the right and appointed time. So I think that serves as a great introduction. First of all, I want to know if you have any questions. Unfortunately, Frederick could not be here with us tonight. He wrote me an email and he says, you have no respect for your European students and teachers. It's 1 o'clock in the morning in Germany and I can't join you. But I promised that I would send him a recording. But do you have any questions about the material that we've covered thus far? And if not, we're going to go ahead and start looking at the texts again.
If you want to speak and you're muted, just unmute yourself and just go ahead and ask the question. I have a comment on that question, but let's see if the participants have questions.
Have any of you been to Portugal? Alan, I knew you have. Were you near Belmonte?
We did not go to Belmonte. It was a little farther north than we were. But I will say, as a comment, the historian that we did meet with and took a tour told us that the term Marrano was considered a derogatory term amongst the crypto-Jews, meaning in Yiddish would be chazer, the pigs. So he preferred the term crypto-Jews rather. than Murano. But this was we also heard a story that there was some Hebrew writing on a stone, part of a building that for years and years people had looked at it, not know what it was, and then some American tourists were there, American Jewish tourists were there, who recognized the line from one of the Psalms, and it had been etched into this building up in Belmonte or close to it.
Yeah, in the movie, I was surprised that they called themselves Muranos, but it's crypto-Jews, and I think there's a, maybe in Hebrew now they call them, is it Anusim or? Anusim. Those who are forced. Anusim. But again, I think it touches a little bit on this dialectic of taking that which is forced upon you, the worst situation that's forced upon you, and owning it. And that's a good segue as we discuss the Passover that we're about to have. And that's why I wanted to discuss Pesach Sheni, because I think that the Passover that we are about to enter will probably go down in our history as our personal history. My grandchildren will tell their grandchildren that they were alive for the Seder held during the coronavirus, when literally people were dying outside. It's mind-boggling how this Seder will be different, and for many of us, it will be inauthentic. It'll be inauthentic because we're not surrounded by family. It'll be inauthentic because we're not truly celebrating. But I think what we'll maybe touch upon tonight is at another level, it'll actually be very authentic. And I think that that aspect of it is something that we can embrace, we can own, and we can try to better understand. So let's go back to the original text. One question that I want to run by you is who understands what happened to these people who came and said that they were tameh? So in other words, what happens is if you come into contact with a dead person, you are tameh, impure, for 7 days. A lot of people have asked me recently, is there any such thing as social distancing in the Torah? Is there any such thing as what we are, as a virus in the Torah? And I don't think you can get a better analog than the laws of purity. So if a person comes into contact with anything that is resembling death, and you can make the argument that we Jews left Egypt, and Egypt was a religion based on death. They lived for the afterlife. All the power was accrued by the priests because they owned the afterlife, and we totally rejected that. Whatever the reason is, Judaism has an affinity for life, and it has an aversion for death. So if you come into contact with a dead body, you have to go into social distancing for 7 days. And after those 7 days are over, then you can come back to the community and you can do a celebration such as this. So we don't know the circumstances under which these men became impure. But we do know that they seem to be, the emphasis seems to be that they can't bring the Passover sacrifice. In other words, they say that, today, there were some men who were unclean by reason of a corpse and could not offer the Passover sacrifice on that day. So the rabbis in the Talmud pick up on these two facts, and they try to flush out for us a picture of who these men were and what their circumstances were. So if you're following in the text, I'm on paragraph 9 now. And it says in the Tractate of Sukkah, they were unnamed people who were engaged tending to a corpse whose burial is a mitzvah. So I don't know about you, but my assumption was when they became impure, I figured their brother passed away. I figured their dad passed away. I figured through no merit and no fault of their own, they came into touch with a dead body. That's not the way the Talmud reads it. These were caregivers. These were people who did the ultimate mitzvah in Judaism, the mitzvah of attending to a person who has passed away. It's called a met mitzvah because you can never be repaid. So all of a sudden it flushes out the story, and it says that they had been engaged for the best of reasons. In a sense, they had done one mitzvah at the expense of another mitzvah, and they could not bring the sacrifice. But at sunset, they would be able to eat from the sacrifice. So here we have another takeaway. For those of you who are busy cleaning your home, for those of you who will be cooking the meal, preparing for the Seder is just as important and just as holy as being at the Seder. And if you don't do one, you can't do the other. So by means of the fact that they had become impure because they had been doing a mitzvah of tending to the dead, they could not do that. They could not bring the Passover sacrifice. And as a result, we don't know whether they could be involved with a Seder, but the chances are in the biblical version you had to do both, so they couldn't. So that's one kind of innovation, or I'd say illumination that I got, thinking of these people, thinking of caregivers. And again, it resonates to the moment that we're in now. Some of us are in isolation to protect ourselves, and some of us are in isolation to protect others. And some of us, the holiest of the holy, are in hospitals tending to people with viruses. And this law of Passover Sheni, the second Passover, is an absolute honor to those people. It created a whole holiday for those people. There's something else that the text does that is strange. If you notice, the men said that all they could do, they couldn't come because they were impure. And then when God answers them, he says, speak to the Israelite people, saying, when any of you or your posterity who are defiled by a corpse or on a long journey would offer a Passover sacrifice. Where did the journey come from? Who said anything about a journey? These guys were standing right there. So it's an interesting case, and we're going to finish with some thoughts that the Lubavitcher rabbi who spoke about this Passover Sheni at a long period of time. But one of the things that he encouraged his followers is you've got to ask. Don't be diminutive. He said, here is a law. He called it the 613th commandment that we wouldn't have if these guys did not say that they were deprived. So if we are really learning from this Passover Sheni, we also have to we know it's better. We have to tell our children who might be at the Seder that they remember the first of their lives. This is not how it always is. We are being deprived. We have to ask for more. But nonetheless, when you ask for more, you get more. And here they asked if they were impure, if they could participate. And God added to that, not only that, but if you're traveling, if you happen to be too far away from home and you can't make it to the temple in time, that's also a good excuse. Which again is shocking, because not only is God, he or she, giving us more than we asked for, but think of it. If you cared about the holiday, what were you doing traveling? You should have planned your holiday around Passover. But in a sense, what this law is telling us is just how welcoming the message of Passover is. And so we go to our next text, and that is text number 10. And this is a Mishnah in the tractate of Pesachim. And it says, what is a far-off journey? From Modim and beyond? The same distance on all sides of Jerusalem? That's what Rabbi Akiva said. Rabbi Eliezer said, from the threshold of the temple court and beyond. Rabbi Yossi said to him, for that reason the hay has a dot on it, in order to say, not because it is really far off, but even if you were just outside of the threshold of the temple court. So first of all, let's explain the dot above the hay. I took a picture from my tikkun of the words that they're talking about. And if you look at the word rechoka, which is we are too far away, it has a little dot on it. Now, what about the hay made the rabbis think of a door? Take a quick, close look at that hay. What do you see? You see the mantle of a door, you see the side of a door, and then that little unconnected hay in the middle, that little thing, is the door. And I love to collect Haggadot. I have maybe 30, 40 Haggadot, especially from Israel. And this is the picture, I'm going to show it on the screen, of Halach Ma'anya. Look at that hay. That's how we begin the Seder. That's that hay. That's the door. That's the door that's open to everybody. That's the door that says you can never be too far away. Even if you are steps away from the house, whether it's the temple or our home, it opens for you. It's just, I was always loved this picture, but it's literally the first words that we say. And if you look at the commentaries on Halach Ma'anya, which ultimately says, Kol tzrich yetevi yiftach. Everyone who needs, come and do the Pesach with us. Kol dichfin yetevi yachal. All who is ready, let him come and eat. One of the commentaries says, what does dichfin mean? Whoever's not tameh. So in a sense, this hay and this paragraph literally talks to the subject that we're talking to today. That inherent with Pesach Rishon, the first Pesach that we currently celebrate, and Pesach Sheni, is this concept that for any reason, if you cannot come in, you are still welcome, and there's another chance. And this is something that commentators such as Menachem Schneerson picked up upon and said was literally the message of Pesach Sheni. So there's one other thing that I'd like to point out. If you notice at the end of our original verse, it talks about the law for the future. And it says, therefore, on the 14th day of the following month, you need to take the bitter herbs and the unleavened bread, and you have to do all of these things. And then in verse 13 it says, but if a man who is clean and not on a journey refrains from offering the Passover sacrifice, that person shall be cut off from his kin, for he did not present the Lord's offering at its set time. That man shall bear his guilt. So unlock your microphones. Tell me what this means to you. Does it mean if you miss the first Seder on purpose, you don't get a card to go clean to the second Seder? You've already been excommunicated, so to speak. Or does it mean that if you intentionally, not because you're traveling, not because you're tameh, but if you intentionally miss the first Seder, you still have the magic of Pesach Sheni? I don't know, the first time I read it, it would seem pretty clear to me that it says if he who's clean and not on a journey refrains from offering the Passover sacrifice, we're talking about the first Passover sacrifice. You don't get another chance if you do it on purpose. So now we go to our next source from the Talmud. And this is source number 14. And all three of them expounded the same verse. But the man who is ritually pure and is not on a journey, and refrains from offering the Passover sacrifice, that soul shall be cut off from his people, because he did not bring the offering. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, this is the great Yehuda Hanassi who wrote the Mishnah, holds that the verse should be understood as follow. The phrase, and refrains from offering the paschal lamb, their soul shall be cut off, means that he did not participate in the offering of the first Pesach. That's the obvious interpretation. In the continuation of the verse, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi understands the word ki to mean if. It adds an extra level of contingency, as the word ki has various meaning, one of which is if. Therefore, the verse can be interpreted in the following manner. if he also did not bring the offering of the Lord in its appointed season with regard to the second Pesach, that man shall bear his sin. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi not only gives us a novel interpretation, but he gives us his thought, his process. And bottom line, in a revolutionary manner, the rabbis, you can say whatever you want about the rabbis, they can be very strict. But when it came to this law of Passover, they bent themselves over backwards to say, you have another chance. The door is not closed. Even if you intentionally did not do the first Seder, the verse says, if you didn't bring the Passover lamb, it means you didn't bring the first one, and it didn't bring the second one. Hi, Rabbi. How are you?
Hi, Jeffrey. I'm doing well. How's it going?
It's going well so far.
Great.
So
Cantor's going to have to jump off at some point. He's going to make me the co-host, and then I can share the Sepharic if we need to.
very good. So I want to, before I finish, I want to share two fascinating halachot. And I don't know if my grandchildren are still listening. But there are two laws that affect the second Seder. If the question is, according to everybody, let's assume it's the 613th commandment. There are many of us who will never have an opportunity to celebrate it. There are two people that will definitely have to celebrate it. If somebody converts after the first Seder, the 15th of Nisan, they were not around for the first Seder. They were not obligated to observe the first Seder. They have to, till today, keep the second Seder. And if, like my grandson Adam, who is listening right now, you were born on Chol HaMoed Pesach, and you become a bar mitzvah, please God, in 3 years, on Chol HaMoed Pesach, when you had sat at a Seder 5 days earlier, you were not obligated to keep the laws of Passover. So you have not kept Passover, but you are obligated now to keep Passover. So you, my friend, will have to observe Pesach Sheni, and you will be one of those unique Jews who has the ability to fulfill the 613th commandment of Pesach Sheni. So you're a very lucky kid. Anyway, I'd like to conclude by talking about what this all means for us. Clearly, our Seder this year is going to be dramatically different than any Seder that we've ever kept, and please God, than any Seder that we ever will keep. We'll be separated from people we want to be with. We'll maybe not have all the foodstuffs that we normally have. And more importantly, we're going to be concerned. Our happiness is going to be dipped in bitter herbs. Passover, the Seder night, is always called Leil Shmurim. It's a light of watching. And for the first Seder in history, it truly was a night of trepidation. There were people dying outside. And everybody inside felt that. And everybody inside, they were one of the Moranos that we talked about earlier in Piemonte, Portugal. Their forebears celebrated Passover under those same circumstances, with fear in their hearts that they would be discovered. But that fear, they turned around and they owned, and they made it their Seder of choice. And so this Seder is going to be, whether we celebrate one or two Seders, and I don't mean the first night and the second night. Mm-hmm. I mean, please God, that when a month after the 14th of Nisan, please God, the virus has peaked, and maybe we can all look outside and see the blooming of the spring. Maybe then we'll be able to celebrate a Passover with unheld back joy. But our first Seder is going to be one that's definitely going to be tinged with this cloud over us. And I think it's going to be very special, and we have to embrace it. We are going to be linked to our forebears in ways that probably no modern Jew has. And I encourage us all to see a movie like The Last Moranos and see other things about the history of Passover. because this Passover will truly be historic. So with that, I want to wish you Chag Kosher V'Sameach, and wish for all of us that we should celebrate soon Passover together, where there is no cloud of a virus or of any tribulation over us, and that we can open up our doors freely and let in the fresh air and let in our friends and celebrate as we had in the past. But for this Seder, let us grab and hug every moment of it and celebrate a Pesach like we have never celebrated before. L'chaim. Today's song is Ki Ba Moed, composed and sung by Shlomo Carlebach. The words are from Psalms 102:14, and Ki Ba Moed means, alternatively, that the holiday, the meeting, the appointed time has come. It's time. Enjoy.
Ki ba moed, 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 ki ba moed. Kiva moed, kiva moed, kiva moed, kiva, 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 kiva moed, kiva moed. Ki